Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina, who's also a grifter, narcissist, and wildly inconsistent, was called out by none other than a Fox News host for her behavior and her reputation. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, I've got several clips to play. They are all wildly entertaining, not the least of which is the call out by Fox News host Neil Cavuto of Nancy Mace. But first, I want to play this clip from Kevin McCarthy, the former Republican speaker whom Nancy Mace used to be an ally of, and then Nancy Mace betrayed him, I guess he perceives it that way, by voting with Matt Gaetz to oust him from his position. This is what he had to say about Nancy Mace.
I think the two that were really different than all the others were Tim Burchett and Nancy Mace. You know, that's just, the others hadn't voted for me before anyways. They were disruptors the whole time.
What about them surprised you, Burchett and Mace?
It just didn't, it seemed out of nature, but they seemed to have changed during the time. They care a lot about press, not about policy, so they seem to just want the press and the personality.
I think that's a good way to describe the Republican Party as a whole. I don't think it's exclusive to Tim Burchett or Nancy Mace, certainly, but Nancy Mace does seem to be arguably the embodiment of it, with the possible exception of somebody like Matt Gaetz himself. So with that in mind, this is what Fox News host Neil Cavuto had to say and ask Nancy Mace.
You know, what is it, Congressman, between you and Kevin McCarthy? Right now he says you deserve to lose your re-election bid. Doesn't like the way you behave. Your colleagues are increasingly saying they don't know whether to trust you or know where you're coming from. The Washington Post says Maverick or a MAGA warrior. Nancy Mace tries to be both. What's going on?
Well, I certainly haven't given any of my colleagues or the country a reason not to trust me. I certainly would never elbow someone in the kidneys and run away like a schoolboy on the schoolyard in kindergarten. I wouldn't be doing that.
You're talking about the charge that Kevin McCarthy, did a kidney punch to Congressman Burchett. But go ahead.
It's terrible. You know, Tim Burchett is one of the nicest humans in Congress. Why anybody would do that? Witnessed by a reporter from NPR who wrote about it on social media. I just can't believe that kind of thing would be tolerated today, and it should not be tolerated. And I wish more of my colleagues had spoken out in defense of Tim Burchett. It was wrong, and we should not be using physical retaliation against anyone. And look, if anyone, I've given no reason for anyone not to trust me. I've always promised to work hard and promised to work with anyone on either side of the aisle. If they're willing to work with me, I am willing to work with them. I hold no grudges. Everything is water under the bridge. We've got to move forward for our country and work hard for our kids and their future.
I understand that, and I know maybe given your rising fame and only 2 terms, now seeking a third, you've certainly gotten a lot of people's attention, but a lot of your colleagues just don't know what to make of you. There was a time that you liked Kevin McCarthy, then you didn't, that you liked and supported, Steve Scalise, and then you didn't. Right now you say you're with Mike Johnson, that's great, but they don't trust you. In fact, there's this Washington Post story that says, how do you talk to a narcissist? A lot of people feel that you're a narcissist. It's all about Nancy Mace. What do you say?
Politics sure is an ugly business, isn't it, Neil? And when you are on the rise, people are going to attack you no matter what. And I didn't read the Washington Post article. I quite frankly don't care what the Washington Post thinks about me. I care about what my constituents in my state and the people across this country that I'm trying to support, I care what they think. I don't serve Washington. I don't just serve Washington Post. I serve the people of South Carolina, and that's where we're going to keep it.
So again, her words ring hollow for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that, take her position, for example, again on abortion. We've discussed this because this is probably the single biggest sticking issue with Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace will rhetorically advocate for pro-choice positions, right? She'll say that, part of the reason that the Republican Party is hemorrhaging vote among women is because they have such an extreme position on abortion rights or lack thereof. And yet when it comes time to put her money where her mouth is with her vote, she votes in line with the extreme Republican position every time. So I don't know how she's serving her South Carolinian constituents if that's the case. As a sidebar, I've forgotten that an NPR reporter had discussed that, we discussed the alleged altercation between Kevin McCarthy and Tim Burchett. I didn't realize that an NPR writer had written about it on social media, and then it made me think, can you imagine an NPR writer being a narrator or an announcer for a UFC match or whatever, because they're notoriously just so quiet. Oh my gosh, they just went for the leg sweep. This is ridiculous. Just anyway, funny dynamic. But The thing about Nancy Mace, and we talked about this in a previous video too, was it was recently reported in the Daily Beast that reporters actually got a hold of a former staff handbook, okay, like ex-campaign officials, ex-members of the Nancy Mace team basically leaked a campaign handbook to the press. And this was, we did a video about it, and then this interview with Chris Hayes and the guy who actually broke the article about the campaign handbook, they actually did an interview. And so we're not going to play the whole thing, but I want to play some select clips to, again, just really seal the deal about who Nancy Mace is according to official documentation within her own office.
This is a staffer talking about that vote to oust McCarthy, one of 8 in the House Republican caucus. In the eyes of former staffers, she saw the votes on the board and said, F it. I'm just going to vote for it just so I can go on TV and talk about it, a former senior aide said. You should write that quote on the gravestone of American democracy if it comes to that. Jake.
So that's part of the reason why Kevin McCarthy is so frustrated. Now, as we've discussed, Kevin McCarthy is terrible. He's a coward. He's a liar. I mean, there are plenty of legitimate reasons to dislike Kevin McCarthy, but those aren't really the reasons that Nancy Mace seemed to out him. According to those who actually know people who worked with her, she just saw the writing on the wall and saw an opportunity to shank him politically and get attention put on her. So, I mean, I don't see that changing anytime soon. Like I said, Nancy Mace, whether you like it or not, she's very skilled. She's very adept. She has great instincts for capturing media attention. She's very good at it. She's appeared on ABC and CBS and CNN. She's on the Daily Show, of all places. I can't imagine. I'm so shocked every time a Republican politician decides to walk into the lion's den and show up on the Daily Show. Sometimes it happens. So Nancy Mace is going to capture attention for the foreseeable future. And the reason that I like to talk about her is because, to me, she is the embodiment of perhaps not everything that's wrong with the Republican Party, but a great deal of it. A lot of people present her, Jake Tapper, of all people, presents her, and Bill Maher, they describe her as this moderate Republican. She is not. She is very good at presenting herself as a moderate, but when push comes to shove, she's as extreme as the rest of them. Let me know what you think in the comments.